I'm afraid of MK in perhaps gaining power, but I don't think MK aligns with my values. In my personal opinion, MK is not a leftist party. I implore you to show me one photo of Helen Zille marching in the forefront during apartheid. Yes, she opposed apartheid on paper, but was she marching in the forefronts? The ANC has managed poverty for 31 years. The Bible has been used as a great obstacle in the progress of humanity.
Welcome back to Palatable Politics. We make politics palatable. With me, your host, TJ Maslela. Welcome to the show. Today we're going to be discussing human rights, politics, the legacy apartheid has played, and how it impacts us today. Here to give us insights is a political commentator and activist, human rights activist, Mr. Pieter Kriel. Welcome to the show.
TJ, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here with you.
Always a pleasure. Also, guys, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share. I mean, you can do it now. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe and unlike whatever. But please do it now. Let's get that right. Can you walk us through why politics?
Yeah. So I've always sat with this question and wondered why I specifically chose this. And I think it comes down to the way I grew up. I grew up in a divorced household. And I think from a young age, I was able to pick up on certain kinds of injustices, whether that be lies or manipulation or whatever. So I think I've always had a keen eye for spotting injustice. And as I grew older, especially around the age of 14 or 15, that translated into starting to question everything, whether forms of power, wealth, privilege. And I left religion at the age of around 14. That has really shaped the way I see things. It makes me question things and not just accept it blindly.
Can you walk us through that, the religion component? What were your views before and after? I mean, fine, a lot might have happened after that, but what were your views before and after?
So I always, I'm discouraged in saying that I really had religious views before it. I was raised Christian, right? And I practiced Christianity as a form of tradition, not really belief, because to me it was waking up on a Sunday and being reminded that, hey, we have to go to church now, get dressed. So it wasn't really belief, it was more like a tradition. And I started questioning why I had to do this. And I'm actually very, very literate in the Bible. I know the Bible, I've read the Bible, and that made me question. Reading the Bible made me realize that the Bible has been used as a great obstacle in the progress of humanity.
When I went through some of your prior work, you indicated that there's a relationship between religion and colonialism. Yeah. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. So my point of view has always been that when we look at the history of Africa, you see a lot of African indigenous spirituality before the start of colonialism. People worshipping forefathers, ancient spirits up the mountains or in the clouds, things to do with nature. And around the start of the colonial trade, for most of Africa, that changed. People started practicing in Africa organized religion. They started reading texts for belief, which they've never done because their evidence has been nature, has been the cloud or the sun, or their forefathers answering them through meditation or whatever. It's never been Christianity. Christianity as we know it today was brought to Africa alongside Western thought, alongside Western philosophy. It was given to African people at a large scale as a way to divide the mind and physicality, making you believe that you need to suffer now in order to have a good time later, instead of teaching you radical thought in fighting now to make change later, right? And that taught Africans a very submissive worldview. Even though Christianity spread to Africa, a different path from colonialism certain parts in Africa, like Ethiopia and so forth, Christianity at its most part was brought by colonizers.
Moving on to the aspect of white privilege, you're saying that you did grow up with white privilege. What does white privilege look like?
Yeah. To me, white privilege manifests in many different ways. It manifests in physical, economic value, like money and owning a house or inheriting a house or property or land that has been taken in a forceful or unjust manner. And I've always admitted that I've grown up with economic privilege, right? Even though as a family, we've always been working class. My dad works for a municipality. My mom is a teacher. But I still had privilege. I had the chance to go on vacations each December. My parents were able to come and watch my sports every time because they were able and privileged enough to leave their jobs to come and watch my sport. And I realized that quite early on. So it manifests physically most of the time, and it manifests mentally. Being raised and taught from a young age that being white means being superior. It means being smarter. It means being the bearers of civilization and humanity as we should know it. And that is the most dangerous form of privilege, because it's a sort of colonization of the mind. But white people are still privileged through that colonization.
What would you say? I mean, obviously you've had your perspective. How would you say your perspective or engagement has been on the other side? So, I mean, fine, as a white man, when you interact with a black man, how do you think, or how have you experienced that influencing or determining the behavior or actions, words, etc. of the black man, woman, etc.?
We're talking in terms of social media, right?
Yeah, well, whether it's social media, day-to-day politics, just however. Yeah.
So starting out with my political commentary about a year ago, seriously, automatically I realized that people from within my own community found great offense by what I had to say, because I think it put them in a position of uncertainty and out of their comfort zone, and that upset them. I had a lot of good interaction from disadvantaged communities, specifically people from townships and so forth. But as things changed, I think it balanced out. I still have a lot of hate from the white community, but I have noticed that I am receiving more and more comments from our African community saying that, well, what is this guy's agenda? What is he trying to do? Does he have presidential ambitions? And is he trying to deceive us? And I've started engaging with that because I think it's so important. I've never said that I've wanted to lead Africa or South Africa, but I want to ignite a flame in young people's minds, making them realize their power when they start questioning authority and resisting. That is so important, and that is what I'd like to inspire.
Going to, just how the bulk of it starts at being apartheid. What impact has apartheid had on society today, and how long can we blame it?
Yeah, no, I think when we look at apartheid, that is a specific handle given to an extensive period of time that has had negative impacts before we gave it the handle apartheid. I like to start with colonialization, at the start of the colonial trade. Okay. South Africa has had negative economic benefits going back 400-500 years, because we have to realize that there was slavery during colonialism. People were excluded, they were killed, there were wars, and this had economic impacts to this day. Apartheid is colonialism with a different name. And so I always say, and I reference back to Nelson Mandela, even though I am a critic of Nelson Mandela, I reference back to this. He said we had a long walk to freedom. And once he attained that freedom, he reminded us that it's an even longer walk to freedom than he first anticipated. So I think we should stop blaming people that point out the devastating effects of apartheid, both economically and mentally, which is more damaging than economically. Because even though we can take away the land now and redistribute the land, if we don't redistribute mental privilege, when we take away that land, we are stuck with the same problem we had in the first place. Because then you are allowing white people to have the belief that their land is being taken away from them. You have to deconstruct masses and have them understand first that what we're doing here is achieving equality in the long run.
Okay, I agree with you. And I understand the redistribution of land. I mean, it's a physical exercise. I mean, you can do that. Yeah. Mentally, how do you change the mindset?
Yeah, I think it's important to have education be impactful and designed in a way to prioritize creative thinking and analytical thinking and radical thinking over memorization. Because let's be honest, our education system has been designed to have young people memorize texts and mathematic equations instead of designing an education system that teaches them how to solve these problems and how to think creatively and so forth. So it starts at a young age. I've always said it's very difficult to change the mind of a 40-year-old racist. But if you start working with a young human being who has not been infected with racism yet, and you give him a proper education and exposure and assimilation, you break that entirely. You show people that, and you make them realize that, we're in this together. As a person of European descent, I've realized this quite early on. Why do we cling to Europe? As white people in South Africa, our future has not been in Europe for 400 years. We should be focused on the future and prosperity of the African continent and South Africa. And that mindset needs to be changed at a young age.
You mentioned Mandela, and you have some of your critics of him. What are those and why?
I admire a lot of the things that Nelson Mandela stood for and tried to achieve, alongside people like Desmond Tutu and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But I do think, to a large extent, practices and experiments like that, the TRC, was very performative in nature. There were a lot of clever excuses, but not a lot of empathy and heartfelt sorry for what has been done, what has been said, and what has been taken away from the people of South Africa, the indigenous people of South Africa, for hundreds of years. I'm not saying, I've never been an apologist, and I will never be. I don't apologize for apartheid because I was not a part of apartheid. But as a person of white descent, I have to acknowledge that apartheid existed. It had devastating effects. And the only way we're going to fix this is by acknowledging it first and then tackling it head on. But the problem with most conservative, most narrow-thinking white people is that they don't start first by acknowledging that apartheid was as bad as we say it was.
That was, I mean, you obviously answered the question about the Mandela, but some of the guys you did look up to, Chris Honey's. Yeah. What was special about them?
Chris Honey, Steve Biko, Thomas Sankara, Michelle. These are people that questioned authority. These are people that deconstructed their mind at a young age. They saw through the facades of organized religion. To be quite honest with you, perhaps Hani was a agnostic atheist or whatever, but I'm not denying that they might have had spiritual beliefs, but they dared not touch organized religion because they knew that it was a tool for oppression brought here by colonizers. And that goes for most of organized religion. We need to accept that we can have religion as a good thing. Religion and religious communities have one task. They need to build community. They need to feed the hunger, the hungry people, and they need to build community. That's all. They should start being taxed because they are organizations taking in money, and it should stop serving as a colonial tool, telling people that when they die, they'll have a better life than they have now, and continue giving their 10 rand every Saturday or Sunday to their pastor. We've been taught that the future is something created later. The future is something fought for now.
In a South African context and African at large, how would you say the relationship between religion or spirituality and heritage should be moving forward?
Well, I don't think I should speak for Africa as a whole.
Okay.
But I do think that it is so important that we realize the importance of deconstruction, especially in Africa. We need to go back to, and people need to be able to go back to their original roots and see if they want to follow that and if they want to adhere to that. But in my personal opinion, I think spirituality is a very good thing. Meditation, believing that, you know what, there is a cause and effect, something created, and you have an awe for nature or the universe. But the sexism, the racism, the misogyny, the brutal things that you see in religious texts should tell you that it has once endorsed slavery. It has once endorsed colonialism and racism and so forth. Choose the good parts. Love thy neighbor like you love thyself. And get rid of the outdated parts that people who lived in deserts thousands of years ago believed.
Okay. So that's more of the backdrop and history of a lot of essay and how we somewhat got here. Now we are here. From your analysis and analysis of political parties, etc., where are we and our current political system?
South Africa is in a very dangerous spot because we now have 3 or 4 contesting parties, big parties, that basically sit at the precipice of power. Now we have
these 4 parties.
Let's call it the MK Party, the EFF Party, perhaps the ANC and the DA.
Okay.
Right? And we have so many other political parties. Now the question is, do we trust any of these 4 political parties in big positions? Do we trust the ANC? Well, people probably will still vote for them, but trust is fading relatively quickly. You have DA, which have gained perhaps a few percentage points, but that is from previous Freedom Front voters. I don't think the DA's voting base will grow beyond 30% very quickly. So we are left with 2 other parties, MK and EFF. Which one are people going to vote for? When you look at online perspective, in my opinion, people are disenfranchised and unhappy with political parties. I've endorsed EFF in 2024 elections.
Okay.
I waited before joining any political party. I told myself that I had to keep my name independent. But I've been reached by MK. I've not been reached by EFF. And I've had a look back, a stand back, especially this past year, how things have unfolded, especially with Floyd, who a few days ago followed me on Instagram for some reason. But I followed him back. Maybe there's some engagement there. I don't know.
Okay.
I cannot, where I'm sitting now, endorse EFF as a political party in next year's upcoming elections. But
why?
When I look at internal structures and the fighting from within the EFF, and the fact that you don't have leadership change every now and then, to me, that can be dangerous. I still to this day agree that the EFF has the most progressive and inclusive constitution of all parties. But I've not seen that constitution manifest in physicality the way that they've said they would approach it. So I don't think I would be voting for any political party in this upcoming election. But let me tell you what. As soon as there is a 20 or 25-year-old from a good community like Soweto or Khayelitsha, who has built a strong following and has good values and builds a youth-driven, community-driven, community-passionate movement, I will be the first to support them.
You mentioned that MK approached you. What did they say?
I was approached, if I'm not mistaken, by a treasurer from KZN in MK. And I was told that we need to have a meeting. They wanted to do a Zoom. And I kept postponing the Zoom. And it just went off the table because I was not replying. But I can't, in good conscience, support MK. Because to me, MK is a family business. I'm a critic. I look at things, I try to look at it objectively. But that does not mean that I don't acknowledge the great influence that Jacob Zuma has. I remember that man being, I think I was still in high school, I remember him being put in prison and this country is coming to a standstill. That blew my mind when I was 17 or 18 years old. I was like, why is this guy not winning elections? But he has the power to do what no president has done in South Africa. That is why I say that I'm afraid of MK in perhaps gaining power. But I don't think MK aligns with my values. In my personal opinion, MK is not a leftist party.
Or what are they?
I think MK leans more toward, the right.
Okay. What are the things about, can't say their manifesto, but what about the policies that they've articulated indicates that?
So why I say they are more to the right is because when we look at what populism is, to a large extent, populism and populist opinions usually come from the right? National security, we have to protect our interests, and that spreads like it did with swart gevaar during apartheid, and white people were taught that you have to fear Africans invading at any second, and they still hold that belief to this day. I think it is important to notice the populist approaches in MK. They, to me, unlike the EFF, they've not had consistent policy or stance on their policies the way that EFF has had. I see them working with white capital quite often, whilst on paper not being a fan of white capital. You can say the same about Cyril Ramaphosa.
So I can see a comment saying, what white capital has MK worked with?
Yeah, I think if you look at past deals that have been done in Jacob Zuma's presidential term, there were numerous deals that were done in prominent white-owned or white-dominated spheres like construction and mining and infrastructure and so forth, all dominated and tenders given to white capital, to very rich families that have always been at the center top of this sphere. And also some other scandals of white capital that has been attracted to his name, like Louis Liebenberg, who is a prominent, I say prominent, but more infamous person tied to diamond fraud or whatever that is. And MK went to his hearing in court.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Zuma also visited him.
It might be. I'm not sure about
Not so
that.
long
But
ago, yeah.
that tells me there's regular meetings between these people know each other. They can't support each other where optics is so important and you can be implicated by just being with some person. they're comfortable being around each other. And that tells me that Zuma is not all too comfortable. All too uncomfortable around white capital.
Okay, we've largely touched the EFF MK, the DA.
Yeah.
Why not them?
I could never support a party that plays disguise, right?
Okay.
I've always loved having debates and talking about your personal opinions, right? If you're a racist, come up to me, we'll have a debate, I'll tell you why I disagree with you, I'll tell you there is mental help for that, and we'll go our separate ways. But the DA disguises their true agenda by calling themselves all-inclusive and the most diverse political party and so forth. And one more example is the recent new bill they want to propose that goes against BEE. It's clearly designed to show that they do not accept progressive policies that try to bring restitution to previously disadvantaged communities. They only serve a select few people, which include the black elite and very wealthy white communities.
If you were to outline that bill and some of the key components, what would you say? What are the key highlights of the bill?
They speak of scrapping BE and presenting a bill that favors performance and adherence to working and to job sustainability and opportunities more than they do tie that to trying to understand why we have to implement these restitution progressive policies. Let me clarify what I mean by that. In my opinion, their bill tries to sound inclusive. It tries to, in a neoliberal way, make you understand that you and you alone are responsible for your suffering. And we are going to teach you how to fix your own suffering, which is your fault, right? Without really saying that, because that is what neoliberalism is. Without acknowledging the past and the present and so forth. I couldn't in good conscience support the DA or any person who creates their own political party who've been in the DA. No.
In one of the articles you wrote around about Helen Zille in particular, I think there was a part where you said that she is almost all things individualistic and very far away from the collective. Yeah. What do you think of her running for mayor of Joburg?
I think she shouldn't, to be quite honest. She's a washed-up politician who's been around the block, much like Patricia de Lille, and they really have no benefit to trying to serve the people of South Africa, because it's all about performance and about going on TV shows and doing media outbursts a few months before local elections. But you don't see Helen Zille going into Khayelitsha like, and I'll use a United States reference for once, which I don't usually do, to Zoran Mandami, who gets on public transport and goes through the streets of New York. Why is she not in the forefront in disadvantaged places like Soweto and Alexandra, showing the people that she's there? I'm willing to put myself here, show you that it's not about me telling you, it's about being next to one another and trying to find common solutions. And that is only gained by talking to one another, understanding, empathizing with one another. But she's on a high pedestal every single time you see her, whether that's on DSTV and whatever cook thing she was on. I don't know what it was called.
Okay, the roast. Okay,
the roast,
yeah.
Which was really, if she spent that 3 hours trying to understand the perspective of disenfranchised communities in this country, perhaps she'd get 2% more. But I promise you that she is not the candidate for Johannesburg. She has no progressive policy to lean on. She doesn't understand the struggle of so many communities in this country, including deconstructed white communities who still have to suffer in family spheres with racism and tied privilege, and they have to try and, please other people.
One would say, given her journey, that she has been at the forefront of, let's say, activism, whether it was a Steve Biko and just fighting apartheid.
Yeah.
Would you say that is still part of her front, or would you say that maybe things have changed along the way?
I implore you to show me one photo of Helen Zille marching in the forefront during apartheid. Helen Zille was a journalist who got her job from a very privileged white network in a very neoliberal capitalist framework. She was paid to give her opinion from a liberal perspective. She got her job from her own privilege because she was white. Yes, she opposed apartheid on paper. But was she marching in the forefronts, understanding the people's perspective, trying to resist? I don't see that. So I've never agreed that she was in the forefront of apartheid activism. I think though she was active in a certain activist network, that was mostly from the privilege of her couch when writing, not putting her life in danger like Ronnie Kasrils did and other white activists during apartheid.
Now, the African National Congress. We've largely also discussed the element of BEE. Let's start with that. Is BEE a progressive or a policy tool that is going to get us redistribution as a country?
I think BEE, the concept that it is based on, trying to bring restitution to the people of South Africa, the previously disadvantaged communities, is very necessary, but implemented incorrectly. And once again, I tie this back to mental privilege and the deconstruction of that mental privilege. When white people at large, the normal middle-class white person, notice that they are not getting a job because of specific quotas, they automatically tie that to their worth and they call it reverse discrimination. Why do they do that? And why do I not do that? I do not do that because I've had the time to understand and deconstruct my privilege, to understand that my worth is not tied to the amount of money that I hold, but to the type of environment that I try to create, whether that be a good and sustainable environment or whatever it might be. When you deconstruct the white community's tie to privilege and to economic wealth as to the land, you untie that, you deconstruct them. When you implement BEE in a correct way and land restitution in a correct way, we are not losing our land. We are not losing our economic privilege. We are realizing that this is not ours. It's ours. It's everyone's. And it needs to be shared to achieve a more equitable society. But there's misinformation. It's because of populist ideas. Immediately it's reversed racism. But they deny the 400 years of colonialism and 50 years of apartheid, and so forth.
Okay, then outside of BEE, the ANC as a ruling government that has been there for, I think, 31 years now, how do you think they have done? Like, what are some of the pros and cons?
Well, I think they've built quite a few homes. They've held firm in their position that they are the only party that has delivered freedom to the people. And that is why people still largely trust them, is because they're the only party with a proven track record. And what I mean by that is it's not about economics. It's not about, getting the best buildings and the best water infrastructure. It's about that fear of 400 years of colonialism, 50 years of apartheid, not the physicality. We have a lot of wealth within the communities of the colored community, the African community, right? What we don't have is that among all people. And that is why I think it's important to note that the ANC has delivered some of their promises. They've done things, but they've not done it to a scale that benefits all South Africans, especially previously disadvantaged. It's become a ring that serves a select few people. I don't know if you've read Animal Farm by George Orwell. And I take this back to that. We got dispensation in 1994, right? And we got freedom from the oppression of colonizers, from that mindset. But because we did not deconstruct the people, both people of color and white people, we didn't teach them the right education and give them the right context. That is where our problem now has gone wrong, because we've not shown people the right history. We're still very much in an education system that is designed to keep you not questioning power. We have to vote for the ANC because it's our only alternative, right? No, make that alternative. There's so many good, young, inspirational people from townships like Soweto and Alexandra. I've seen people in the schools in Alexandra. They have the potential to be the president of this country, but they don't have the access to the networks or the education that will help take them there. And that is why I say the ANC has managed poverty for 31 years. They've not held their promise of trying to do away with the inequalities of the past.
And then what about your other parties, your Bosa, Good, Rise, the Action SA, like there are many other parties. Yeah. Where do you rank them?
They all fall under a neoliberalist framework. They protect free markets. They care about not disturbing peace and not disturbing the markets in order to keep people quiet and not questioning and not revolting and not resisting. No, I think they're puppet parties. No.
What economic ideology or framework do you think would work for? I'm
going to get a lot of hate for this one.
I mean, you are a bit used to it.
I did a tweet the other day because I keep calling a liberal on X, and my tweet said, I keep calling a liberal on my social medias, and I just want to clarify that. And I think this will probably make it worse. I'm a socialist, and I believe in the progressive qualities that will try to redistribute wealth, privilege, and philosophical structure to people, so that they can live a more equal and equitable, live in a more equal and equitable society. Though I'm also the biggest critic of Marxist theory, because I have to acknowledge where socialism and communism has gone wrong in the past, where power has been taken over but implemented exactly the same, right? In the same way.
And that's the Animal Farm.
That's the Animal Farm thing, right?
For those that haven't read it, can you just walk us through the analogy?
And it's such a good allegorical novella, but I think it's so important to not turn a blind eye to these things. We have to critique these systems. So though I call myself a socialist, I'm the first one to criticize communism and socialism, but I will also never deny the fact that Karl Marx wrote the best critique of capitalism in history. It's only that we lost Karl Marx, and socialism and and Marxist theory never really adapted. But capitalism adapted. It became liberalism, became neoliberalism. Capitalism and neoliberalism and liberalism always go hand in hand. And capitalism and injustice are tied like this.
You know, what you're saying about the change reminds me of, in one of your articles, is it John Keynes, the economist, they were saying something along the lines of, it is not new ideas that we have a problem with, but letting go of previous. Yeah. How does it go?
Yeah. So I've always said that when we question something, when we are being questioned for, say, our religion or our ideology or whatever, we get uncomfortable defending that position because we're trying to answer them and defend our position instead of trying to understand what the other person is saying. And that is what is so dangerous. It's not, and I take this back to the TRC, it's not saying sorry that matters. Anyone can say sorry. It's acknowledging that wrong has been done and we have to fix it.
Before get carried away, the analogy of Animal Farm and in the books, and I know you've also gone through it, about when you've changed political systems, or rather you've changed the leaders, but it still stays the same. Yeah. Could you just, for our viewers that haven't read the book?
Yeah, so basically, when we get tired of a specific system, we resist. We start resisting. And we start gathering and making ideas and start writing music, chants, or melodies, or constitutions to oppose what has been oppressing us. And when you get to a specific point where you know enough and when you've organized enough, people say, now we are taking over. Right? And that is what happened in 1994. We had oppression from colonizers and from an imperialist framework, a very nationalist framework, be dissolved. But because our leaders did not study that which they tried to overthrow, its inceptions, how it operates, its complexities, how it evolves, how it implements, because they didn't study that, make it history, make it mandatory to learn not about what happened, but why it happened and what effects it had and this and that. You change the entire question and you make it a personal thing, a personal, it's mandatory that when we overthrow power, we don't implement or result back to the same things that we tried to overthrow, which is usually human nature because of greed and corruption. So yes, when the ANC overthrew the previous regime, they had all the best intentions. Corruption didn't start with the ANC. Went back to imperialism, to the colonial trade when it was brought here. The ANC inherited a system, a corrupt system, a capitalist system, a one-side-all system. And they didn't learn from the mistakes of the oppressors. So what did they do? Freedom came, right? The freedom, political freedom, the right to vote. But economic freedom only went to a few people in positions of privilege, both black and both of color. And that is shown in Animal Farm. When we overthrow power, we immediately, if we don't question and we don't keep critical, resort back to our human nature, which is corrupt and self-serving in its nature.
Wait, so you're saying inherently people are corrupt?
I think corruption is a tendency that has been inherited by humans. And I say this because I believe in a naturalistic worldview. I believe that humans are here on this planet only trying to survive. Every day is a fight for survival. You need to get food. You need to pay for shelter. You need to do this. You need to lie. You need to steal. If you're a capitalist, especially, because if you want to be rich, you need to lie and steal, right? And that is survival of the fittest, and that is why corruption seems to manifest in us as humans more than a dozen other animals, because we have reasoning and the capability of seeing the future or trying to imagine the future. And that is why we have corruption, because we need to plan for the future. I don't have enough now, let me take more. And it's become a human tendency.
Where I would disagree and have a different view on it is I don't believe everyone needs to necessarily steal and lie to attain riches or wealth, etc. However, what I will say about politics in an African sense, and Africa in particular, and we're in South Africa, so we'll talk about South Africa, is that politics has become a opportunity for less fortunate or previously disadvantaged to change a generational, whether it's wealth, curse, however you want to phrase it. So I would say that that component is one that we do need to work on. But with that said, how do we build a better batch? Oh, how do we build a batch of leaders that are going to take us to the next step?
I think, once again, we need to define what a leader is. And
That's a great
should
starting point. Yeah.
should leaders be people, individuals that lead people? Or should leaders be collective groups of communities that get together, debate and design policy for their future and for their children's future? I think we're past this idea, or should be at least, this idea of individualistic leaders. That's so 20th century. I think we need structures in place that get as many people together as possible, where they get to make opinions and ideas, but this structure implements it so that we don't keep power centralized in the hands of a few. So we only focus on collective ownership and collective intake and collective output and so forth as a group of people, right? Some might call me a communist now for saying that.
Sounds like it.
But I do think being born in the 21st century is a miracle. It's the only miracle that has happened in the history of humanity, because you have access to all the information known to man at your fingertips, and still we choose to be arrogant and ignorant about it. We are the smartest humans that have ever lived, and yet we are too stupid to recognize it.
Going back to the communism aspect that you've highlighted. Communism, I fundamentally do have beliefs of communism nature, but communism in itself feels not practical, like it's impractical. And from what you've said, that, you're trying to get institutions and a collective, but with the fault in it, well, not fault in it, but whatever, that it would still be required to be administrated by a few, which I assume brings us back to the problem of having a few people governing or taking care of everyone else.
Unless we have a structure, a centralized middle structure that tells us that each community should have their own governance by their own say. So let's say Heidelberg has a population of 10,000 people,
Okay.
for example, right, where I come from. If we can get together 1,000 people as many times as we can during a month or during every few months, right? And we get together and we talk about things and we debate about things. And we say that, well, this is what we need to happen here in this place, and this is what we need to happen here in this part of Heidelberg. And you go to the government building or to the municipality and you present that idea to them and you demand that of them, because what is the role of government? It's to be held responsible. And that is why we've failed so much in bringing about a more equal and equitable society, is because we don't hold power accountable. We don't go to municipalities as white and black and people of color and whatever and get together and say, well, this is for the betterment and the good of our children. And you will do this. Otherwise, we will make this economy crash. Why can we only crash the economy for Jacob Zuma, but not for the children suffering or starving in townships across this country? We are too centralized around individualistic people instead of being focused on each other and understanding Ubuntu philosophy. I am you and you are me, and our future depends on one another.
Okay, no, I hear you. And I assume that does go towards a constituency-based model, which one of our former guests has alluded to, of having people accountable to the people that vote them in, which is exactly what you were saying. Now, if we're to touch on how one of the biggest things in the news every day, you can't run away from it, Mthlante Commission. What's your take on that? Or Konazi, rather.
Only focusing on all the news flashes you get from Twitter or social media posts. I think what is being done is very necessary. The things that have been said and the people who have been implicated, I hope this Mthlante Commission isn't the failure that all of the other inquiries toward justice and trying to fix corruption and so forth doesn't result in the same thing. Because we've had these commissions, we've had them since 1994 to try and hold people accountable. But every time it's a dead end. So I hope it doesn't fall dead on its tracks, much like all other commissions. But what I think is different about this one is you have people speaking out against power, against authority, which usually don't happen at this scale that it is happening. And that's why I don't comment on it too much, because I think it's going to get very messy very quickly if more things are said.
What do you think it says about the things being said? What do you think it says about our political system, law enforcement?
I think a lot of people call it a mafia syndicate because it operates like an intelligent crime syndicate. I don't call it that. I've had the thought experiment of having people decide that for themselves, but I've not called it that because I think all governments around the world inherently function like a syndicate, because there has to be a lot of under the table discussions. We want this goal and then you give us this and we'll agree with you on the news. So it's a lot of optics, which usually also goes back to these syndicates in power, because it has to be done under the table. It's a mix and a match. So I think we've always seen it. It comes back to why I refer to corruption as a tendency that has become inherited in our DNA. We're so used to it. We're so used to exploiting and so forth that it seems normal to do it. So I think it's going to be interesting the next few months, seeing what comes out. And the things that have been said about our specific president and the people that have been trying to disband commissions like these and inquiries like the political task team's killings, trying to disband that, should be questioned rigorously by the people. Because, let's be honest, and I'm going to use a very brutal example, how does a girl or a young man who's experienced a devastating crime or sexual abuse or whatever, how do they go to the police knowing that we have a trustable working force that serves the people or should serve the people, but they don't have the confidence, the trust in our police service to go to them and say, you know what, this is what happened to me, and I'm not afraid to tell it to you because I know you're connected to that guy or to this guy or whatever. Let's be honest, our police arrest the same drug dealers that they go and receive bribes from on a weekly basis. The police receives bribes from illegal shops and street vendors, at the same time arresting them on a weekly basis. And that shows distrust and dysfunction in our system, right? And I think the police force especially should be a force that always stands in solidarity with the people, to show them that we are here to protect you and that we are here to serve you. And that connects back to government. We can't trust the police, we can't trust the government. When does young people say this is enough? And we resist and we take control ourselves. We think taking control is overthrowing the government with guns and weapons. It's not. It's getting out in large numbers, organizing, sharing collective knowledge, and showing people what they want. Because people think they know what they want, which is YouTube videos and instant gratification and all of that, over trying to fight for long-term sustainability. We're caught in that 1 minute loop.
Moving abroad, Charlie Kirk. What do you think of his views and what happened to him? If anything happened to him.
How provocative do you need me to be?
I need you to be free.
I think...
But palatable.
I think... I'll reference a quote. Live by the sword and you'll die by the sword. The things that Charlie Kirk stood for, things that he advocated for, and he rallied for, in my opinion, should be on the watch lists. Because let's be honest, in 10 or 20 years, what's happening in the United States now, leading up until 20 years from now, we're going to see some of the hugest human rights violations in history. We have an incline towards far-right nationalism, far-right trajectory in the world. In America, in Italy, in France, in Japan now. So, what he stood for, I can never endorse. But I will not say that I endorse political violence, because I do believe that we should be able to get together and speak about things, even when we have disagreements. But we should also be able to stand strong in the things that you do believe in. And if you believe that it's necessary for a few Americans to die every year to protect gun rights, then you've made your mark.
And moving to Palestine, which you were there, spent some time there. What was your experience there, and what do you make of everything that is happening with Israel, Palestine, two-state solutions, etc.?
Well, I think people are uncertain in whether this ceasefire really will be of any measurable effect. But I think there's still a long way toward rebuilding Gaza, bringing people back to their homes. Just imagine the intergenerational trauma that these people would have to live through. Much like the South African case, right? After dispensation, we had freedom, we had assimilation between different cultures, but largely still in our African community, there is a distrust in white governance, in white people taking up leadership positions because of the devastating effects of apartheid and colonialism. And that is why it's important to disband that type of thinking. We need to get to a point where white people can acknowledge these things and say, you know what, like I said earlier, put up your hand and say, I understand I'm of European descent, but my ancestors have been here for 400 years, and I'm committed to ensuring the prosperity of South Africa and the African continent. And I think that really could change a lot of things. It's not just assimilating, right? It's not just hanging out together and shaking hands at football matches or rugby games. It's realizing that unity is more dangerous than corruption. When we stand together, not based on skin color or what we believe in, but what we want for our future and what we want for our children, which comes down to the same things. We want our kids to go to school for free. We want people to be able to go to hospital and get proper medical attention for free. We want people to have reliable infrastructure in transport and buildings and housing and so forth for free. And that can all be achieved. China has redeveloped their economy in 50 years. And we don't like, as the West, and I'm saying that as a fact of the matter of fact, white people still believing that they're part of the West. That has changed. Let's look at different countries and start taking initiative, especially within Africa.
Speaking on that note, you are going to Burkina Faso. What are you going to do then? What do you expect?
So we have a youth conference about the development of Burkina Faso as well as other African countries working together towards building or developing Africa. It's taking place, if I'm not mistaken, from the 18th up until the 8th. But we'll only be leaving on the 17th. We'll be arriving on the 19th because it's a whole day's travel and it's jumping over and all of that. And we'll see how many days we'll be attending, but hopefully up until the 8th. We're a team of about 5 or 6. And of course, mostly young people.
How were these 5 or 6 picked?
Sorry?
How were the 5 or 6 people picked?
So we are going with the African Diaspora Development Institute. It's a well-known continental organization. And they reached out to me and they reached out to other influencers as well as entrepreneurs in South Africa who speak consistently and radically about African transformation, African integration, and the future of Africa. Yeah, that's how it was selected.
One of the things we've been discussing throughout, we just haven't actually put a term on it, identity politics.
Yeah.
How do we deal with the issue of identity politics in South Africa and using that to build social cohesion, economics, but yeah, uniting us economically, politically?
I think identity politics has become so fragmented that it's become a bit of a problem because we want to cling to all of these titles and privileges and ideas, but we cannot carve down back to the fact, and there's only one fact to reference that answer, is the fact that we all come from Africa. our ancestors, and that humanity started in Africa, and that is why the prosperity of the world relies on the prosperity of Africa. Africa is the richest and the most abundant continent, both in people and in natural resources and minerals. If we can only realize that and start developing this continent will be the leading force into the future for humanity. And I think identity politics just makes us not want to acknowledge that we are all humans.
With that said, in closing, what is the biggest myth you'd want to address, or biggest message, or something you'd like everyone to know about you?
About myself. I am not related to Pieter Kriel. We said that in our opening, first opening, and that's still something circulating. I'm the total opposite of him. I don't believe in anything that he believes in.
Have you met him?
No, I've not met. But I also think that we need to break the myth that we cannot make change ourselves. We, like I said earlier, we are the smartest generation to have ever lived in history. And yet we're not organizing in numbers that we should be organizing. We should be making groups and community forums and centers and all of that, where we get together, where we talk to one another, where we try to empathize with each other's struggles, because all people across the board in South Africa have struggles, right? Perhaps white people have less economic struggle, largely, than people of color do. But white people have the devastating effects of that hateful ideologies being taught to them. And that is something that needs to stop, so that we can break the generational barrier, so that racism and this type of colonial imperialist frameworks don't carry on to our next white generation. Because, let me tell you, our next black generation, and this one, Gen Z, they will be the ones to lead South Africa. But as the white generation, I want to remind the white folks at home that you have so much work to do yourself in contributing to a better and more equal society. I don't advocate for black people. I don't speak for black people. I speak alongside black people and with them, as I do with all people of different races and cultures.
Thank you.
Thank you very
for
much for
sharing
having me.
insights and being readily available for us.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Guys, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment. Let us know what you thought of the interview, what your views are, and who you'd like to hear from next. Palatable Politics.